Welcome back to Combat Mission and to the banks of the River Main. The Soviets have invaded Europe with the intention of reaching the River Rhine in 7 days. It's now day 5 of the invasion and the Red Army is well on schedule. Strictly speaking, it's not necessary to cross the River Main for the Soviets to reach their objective, but doing so would allow them to envelop the Americans in Frankfurt and push them west. In order to accomplish this, a battalion was tasked with crossing the River Main at Rumpenheim last night. And although there were expected to be few defenders, the entire battalion was wiped out in a matter of minutes by an American helicopter attack. Today, the Russians are sending in a fresh battalion to try again. The Americans on their side have received reinforcements as well, lying in wait to repel the Soviet amphibious assault. Magellan Jones and I played this scenario head to head as a mirrored match, meaning that we played 2 instances of the game at the same time. One where I attacked while Magellan Jones defended, and one where I was the defender and Magellan Jones attacked. Now, this looks like a straightforward scenario in the sense that there is one objective to capture and one way to get there, across the river. But since we both adopted very different strategies on both the offense and defense, the games played out very differently. And I always believed this to be one of the interesting qualities of Combat Mission. So to show these differences, I've decided to make one video for each battle. In this video, I'll be commanding the Soviets, attempting to attack and take Rumpenheim. This scenario has been designed by Combat Int Man, who worked as a combat intelligence operator in the British Army during the Cold War, and who studied Soviet assault river crossings in detail at the time. If you compare the map of this scenario to the actual village of Rumpenheim, then the similarities are actually impressive. You can see this in the scenario editor, in Google Earth, and on actual photos of the area. With Combat Int Man being something of an authority on the subject of Soviet assault river crossings, I asked him why he had set the scenario here at Rumpenheim. He promptly sent me several maps from the era, and he explained to me that Rumpenheim really is the best crossing site in the vicinity of Frankfurt, as it is best described as a village. It covers less than a grid square. If you look around the area, then you'll see that everywhere else along the river is flanked on either one or both banks by towns which are even less suitable than the area in which the scenario is set. Plus, there's the fact that Rumpenheim is a ferry site, meaning that both banks of the river will support tactical ferrying and snorkeling. So the objective of the Soviet attacker is to cross the river and take and hold the town of Rumpenheim. There's a very important limitation here, and that is that it's only possible to attack Rumpenheim head on. It's not possible to get in or out of the water with amphibious vehicles left and right of these red lines. The Soviets start the scenario with a company of T-64Bs on the map, as well as a platoon of anti-tank vehicles. The infantry is set to arrive in 3 waves of companies, first arriving after 15 minutes and then 1 company every 5 minutes. The Soviets come with plenty of artillery, as they have an entire divisional artillery group at their disposal, meaning 24 howitzers, plus the 8 mortars that come at the battalion level. The Americans will have to make do with a lot less. They are outnumbered at least 3 to 1. At the start of the scenario, they have 2 M60 tank platoons on the map, as well as 4 tow vehicles and some scraps of infantry here and there. There is an infantry platoon on the way, but it's at least half an hour out, as is the promised air support. I've come across some interesting documents describing what a Soviet assault river crossing would look like at the battalion level. It is not unlike the regular Soviet deliberate assault. Both the regular deliberate assault and the river crossing would start with an opening artillery barrage, after which a base of fire would move up to take out any remaining defenders. In this case, I'll move my tanks into a line abreast formation over here. And after the village of Rumpenheim has been pummeled by the artillery for 10 minutes straight, a smokescreen will come down on the left side of the village. after which my base of fire will move up and take out any defender on the right side. After 5 minutes, the smokescreen will switch sides and the process will start over again. At that same time, my first company of infantry is set to arrive on the map. Whether I will send them across the river right away or make them wait for the second echelon so they can cross together, as is actually indicated in the documents that I found, will depend entirely on the situation at that time. As my tank company moves into position, they drive past the smoking remains of the battalion that was taken out last night. My company forms up into formation, out of sight of the defender, under the cover of the trees. There they wait for the smokescreen to come down, after which they will move up and confront whatever Magellan is waiting for them. My troops are not seeing anyone. It's totally quiet on the other side of the river. So I order my company to open fire on the village to see if that draws a response. There's just no one home, and this is the exact opposite of what I was expecting. It feels to me as though Magellan Jones has some sort of plan that I'm not seeing, and that by crossing the river as he expects would be playing into that plan, making me lose the initiative. There's not much that I can do about it, but maybe doing something unexpected would throw a spanner in the works. There is a platoon of infantry that survived last night's slaughter. They are taking refuge at a nearby farm, and they don't have enough amphibious vehicles to move the entire platoon across the river, but I can solve that by loading the infantry into the newly arrived amphibious vehicles of the anti-tank gun platoon. My plan is to use the fact that this is a mirrored battle against Magellan. He has full intel on when my first infantry company is set to arrive on the map, so he knows that it's at least 5 minutes out. So if Magellan is indeed hiding his vehicles inside the town because he's planning to ambush my main force when they cross the river, then crossing early with this platoon will rough up that plan a bit. As soon as they hit the water, a heavy caliber MG opens up from the town and sinks one of the MTs with all hands on board. There are a lot of concrete walls and buildings that would funnel my troops into easy killing zones. So I order my troops to do some urban landscaping to create some new entry points into town. As my infantry reaches the outskirts of Rumpenheim, they use the newly created openings in the walls to enter Schloss Rumpenheim, an 18th century palace on the banks of the river Main, with two parallel wings forming a corps d'honneur. It was bombed in 1943, after which it was renovated, but I think that they just slapped some new windows on they had lying around and called it a day. The renovation of 1983, however, will be done with first-grade Soviet plywood. Slowly, I move the squads of the platoon deeper into town to try and find out what's going on. Besides taking out one tank, my forward platoon has gathered valuable intelligence in the form of sound contacts. It's now clear that Magellan is hiding his vehicles on the main road over here. So I call in a mother of all fire missions, with 12 simultaneously firing howitzers, using 2 conveniently placed target reference points. By now, both the 1st and 2nd Infantry Company have arrived and have lined up in preparation for the river crossing. And when the smokescreen is sufficiently dense and the mother of all fire missions is coming in, I give the order to cross. My two companies crossed the river without being fired at once, and my infantry managed to occupy the buildings next to the river virtually unopposed. But then I failed to notice that the sound contacts on Magellan's vehicles start to move. As 4 of Magellan's tanks storm the landing site, pandemonium ensues, and my own T-64s are not able to support because Magellan is using my own smokescreen as cover. This kill would be the final success of Magellan's bold plan. A kill that takes several American crewmen from the other tank with it. The M60 stormed the landing site, probably hoping to find the BMPs just coming out of the water, but I had begun dismounting the first company of infantry about 90 seconds earlier. Therefore, the M60s were bound to be overwhelmed by the sheer concentration of RPGs in the area. Relieved about the outcome as I was, I did wonder what would have happened if Magellan's tanks would have come forward 2 minutes earlier. They would have found my BMPs in the water, with no support from either the infantry or my tanks on the other riverbank. At the end of the video, we'll be taking a look at what could have been. By my count, I've now taken out 5 out of Magellan's 8 M60 tanks. There should be 3 more inside the town, and I haven't seen his infantry yet either. My 3rd company crosses the river, meaning that I now have a full mechanized infantry battalion inside this small town. My forces basically move through the town like a red tidal wave, freeing the German proletariat left and right and uniting the workforce under the flag of equality. My forces do run into pockets of resistance here and there, but there's no problem that a 10-to-1 ratio can't solve. Because I'm facing a cavalry troop rather than mechanized infantry, I keep running into 2- and 3-man firing teams, which are quickly overcome by sending in the rest of the platoon after one of my squads makes contact. So that's the story of his infantry, and of this one unfortunate M113. But what about Magellan's other vehicles? His tow launchers that I know he has, his tanks, his mortar carriers. When my BMPs were done ferrying troops across the river, I ordered them to move around the town to the left and to the right, to look for opportunities to flank Magellan's positions. Magellan seemingly saw this coming and sent a tank to the right side of town to intercept. The M60 was spotted by an anti-tank BRDM way on the other side of the river. This opened the way for my BMPs to encircle the town on the right side. Which is, it appears, where Magellan hoped to make use of the open terrain with his tow vehicles. The encirclement on the left was threatened for a moment by an M60 also, but luck was not on Magellan's side. A T-64 managed to spot it through the tree foliage, and it put a round through the tiny part of the turret that was visible over the roof of this building. The group that circled around the left side of town then finds the enemy mortar positions in the back. Apparently, the enemy still had plenty of mortar rounds left, as the explosions can be seen from afar. As my soldiers go door to door, they come across Magellan's last tank. My forces then soon come across the last American strong point inside the town. Some HQ unit has taken cover inside a house. And with that, our game was concluded. Magellan surrendered, as he didn't really have anything left to fight with. His reinforcements should have been here 5 minutes ago, but they were now too late to prevent me from taking the entire victory location. After the battle, Magellan told me that the mother of all fire missions had immobilized some of his vehicles, so they couldn't partake in the ambush, and it put his infantry in the pray for this to end mode. So, combined with the tank that they took out, it seems like the platoon that I had sent ahead and that collected the intel that led to the fire mission actually had some effect on the battle's outcome. What sets this scenario apart, I feel, is that the burden of coming up with a cunning plan is on the heavily outnumbered defender rather than on the attacker, as is usually the case. Magellan assessed the situation and decided to go for a high risk, high reward strategy, and arguably this battle was over when the ambush on the landing site didn't go as planned, as after that point his 3 remaining tanks and supporting forces faced somewhere around 300 infantrymen in a small urban area. But coming up with a daring plan and trying to pull it off in a head-to-head battle is something I'm all for in combat mission, as experimenting and finding out what works and what doesn't is where part of the fun is, for me at least. So I was intrigued by the question if Magellan's plan could have worked if his timing had been just a little bit different. We played this game using the automated play-by-email system, which unfortunately means that it wasn't possible to load a save file from just before the ambush and go from there. So I played a hot seat game against myself, recreating the same situation, the only difference being that I now sent the M60s forward when the BMPs were halfway crossing the river, rather than after the infantry had already dismounted. I ran this test a couple of times, the main difference being a different density smokescreen. The question that I wanted to answer was, is the Magellan maneuver a viable strategy? And the test result is yes, but. Yes, it's possible for the US Army to do substantial damage this way, but it's a very risky strategy that I got right 1 out of the 4 times that I ran this test. The most finicky factor is the smoke screen. It has to have just the right density to be able to see the BMPs that are in the water without being seen by the 14 angry T-64s that are looking your way. This is what caused 1 of the 4 tests to go wrong. Problem is, as the defender, you're not the one in control of the smokescreen. 2 of the 4 tests went wrong because the smokescreen was too dense, and when that happens, the 3 or 4 BMPs that come out of the water right in front of your tanks will get killed, but enough vehicles will be able to come ashore unseen and dismount their infantry, usually resulting in the loss of several M60s before they can retreat. The one time I did get it right though, it was a massacre. I sank a full company before the smokescreen became too dense, and I decided that realistically I would have to retreat as BMPs were coming ashore unseen. I feel like this was a bit of an odd video in the sense that this battle did not require terribly interesting decision making from my part, but I did want to show it nonetheless, as together with our mirror battle that will be in my next video, it's a fun example of how the very same scenario can play out very differently. Both this battle and the other one started at the same time and were played synchronously, but the other battle is, at least at the time of posting this video, still ongoing, and I feel that it could still go either way. So make sure to check back and see what that is all about. I'll see you then, and thanks for watching.